Hello and welcome to DigiFX.com. I'm your host Nate Millett, and welcome to another exciting tutorial on some After Effects animation effects techniques that you can learn just by following along and do yourself at home. So today we're going to be talking about how to enhance your logo. And there are many ways to do this. Obviously you can animate it in, you can put some effects layers behind it, or you can just make it really intricate and detailed. We are going to do a number of different things to spruce up this FX logo right here, and including some stuff that's not even shown on the screen now, but just to give you an idea, we'll put a little bit of lens flare in there, some light rays, and what I didn't have time to do is some particle dispersion, where the actual logo itself will start with by a bunch of particles and come in and form this FX logo itself and solidify into a solid vector image as you see here. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this, and I will go into the very first thing I actually want to do is make sure that I have a vector image. And the reason you want something that's vector is you want to be able to scale it over time. So realistically, an EPS is the best way to work, best file format to work with. You can create them in Illustrator, and they are vector, so they do scale. When you use a Photoshop file or a PNG, it's a rasterized image, and when you scale it up, it's going to lose its quality, and that's not very good for professional HD video. So you want to keep that in mind when you're using images that you pull in. And if you don't have an EPS, if you have a PSD, you can convert it into an AI or a vector. It's a little tricky bringing it in and coloring the curve. So try to get the original if possible. So just a good thing to know. So let's go ahead and just open up After Effects right here and get the composition set up so we can start creating our logo animation. Okay, so the very first thing we need to do is actually create a composition, and there are a few ways to do this. You can come into the Create a New Composition icon right here, or you can come up to the menu up top and say New Composition, and let's go ahead and call this just Main Comp, and you can name it whatever you want. But more importantly, you want to make sure that it's set to HGTV 1080 by 29.97. This is pretty much a standard nowadays for most video you see on the web and TV, and it's good to practice working in this, because anything smaller, if you try to blow it up, will be pixelated, and if you were to work in 4K, it can be quite tedious when it comes to rendering out stuff if you don't have hardware that can perform well. So in this case, it's only a 10-second long animation, so you could work in 4K, but I suggest, this is fine for now. So let's go ahead and just press OK and get that comp created. And there we go. We got a new comp. Let's make sure it fits the window and everything's set. So now that the composition's in place, we want to go ahead and import the vector logo that we are going to tweak. So I'll go into right-click here and just say Import, and I can go File. Or you can also just drag them in to this window if this wasn't full size, but this is just as easy. So you'll see this is a PSD. I don't want that one. I want to come back to my DigiFX folder, and I want to go into my Logos folder and find the FX EPS that I actually extracted from my original logo EPS. Now go ahead and import this, and you can see right away that it's vector art, and that's good. That means that we can scale it up all day long, and the computer will calculate the size and dimension and shape, and it will look just as good this small or even bigger. So to prove it, I'll just go ahead and scale it up for you, and you can see that if I turn on the continuous rasterization right here, you can see if I toggle on off, that's not vector. It calculates it for you, so it's nice and sharp. So you want to make sure that the vector layers is continuously rasterized, no matter what the shape is, and you bring it in and then scale it to your liking. I usually, there's no right way to do this, but something like that for me, maybe like 300% is a good place to start. So I'll just bring that there, and it looks good. So I think I'll work with that. So we have our logo in place, we have our comp set up. We need some kind of background. Right now this is a transparent background. Unless you plan on layering this on top of other videos or other compositions, you will want something in the background so that it's not transparent. And you can tell if it's transparent by clicking this toggle transparency grid right here. And right now it is still transparent, but you can't tell because it's filling the transparent background with a black background. So this is the actual background it's seeing, which is emptiness. So we want to fix that. So I'll go in here or actually to change it up, I can come up to layer and I can say new, and I'll just say solid right here. And the color of the solid isn't really important. We just need to create a layer so we can add some effects to it itself. So make sure it's the comp size. If it's not, click the make comp size right here and press OK. And you'll see that it's above our logo. So we'll just have to come to the black solid layer and drag it down. And then maybe while I'm here, just go ahead and name it to background or BG, whatever you want. Okay, so we have and let's go ahead and name this to logo, just to be simple. And now that we have our background layer in place, we want to put some kind of lighting effect so it's not so flat. There are a number of ways you can do this. You can put a 4-color gradient, but what I like to do is actually put a ramp on. And I'll just search for ramp and I'll pull the gradient ramp. But then I'll come in here and instead of a linear, I will make it a radial. And maybe I will, actually swap the colors. Or what I really want to do is I want to not swap the colors, but I want to make this really dark like that, so that it looks. And I also, we can. I was going to say, how do we rotate it? I can just come in here and 180 and rotate it so that the light comes up, and that's fine. I mean, maybe make this even a little bit darker right here, just so it faintly stands out and gives it a little bit of depth. So we'll work with that. That looks good. So now that we have our background layer in place, we have our FX logo sitting here, we want to start thinking about the effects for the logo we want to use ourselves. And there's endless possibilities of what you can do. But for this circumstance, based on what I show you, we're going to keep it very simple and focus on some layers that illuminate the logo itself and make it stand out against the black ramp background. So what I'll do is I'll copy my logo layer right here. And I can copy it by right-clicking and, you can't duplicate it here. So I'll just press Command D or Control D, or I can probably come up here and, duplicate it right here, same thing. So we have an extra logo, this exact same thing. So I want to rename this to Shine, and I'll tell you in a second why we did that. There are many there are many effects that give you a light ray effect. But my favorite one is actually a premium layer effect called Shine. And Shine can be found all over the place. And you see I just dropped it on there on that Shine layer, and it gave us a nice, vibrant, illuminated, light effect. Right off the bat, I can tell you I don't want this red color. It's not really, it kind of doesn't work with us. So we're going to stick to something a little bit more related to what we want to see in the background. And, you want to play around and kind of figure out, these are all presets. You can also come in and make them yourself, but I don't mind using the presets. So I'll just go and I'll use the chemistry one. That looks good. And I'll also just make sure this fits fully, and that's great. So we have our Shine light rays behind our logo. So now what we want to do is actually put some animation on them so that we can see them move over time. And you'll see I'm just moving this little center point over and they move around. So, so this is very easy to accomplish. I want to start it probably over here on the left. And I want to make this about a 10-second long logo sequence. So I'll go ahead and bring this up to, very close, come to the 10-second point, and you can see it's 10 seconds over here. And I'll press the N key to trim the sequence length, and then I can even, bring it up even more so we have most of the sequence in play. And I also want to make sure that I start it at the 0.0 and I end at the 10, so that the whole sequence has movement and there's no still, static image throughout the scene. So I'll drag it all the way to the beginning, and I will click the source point stopwatch, and then I will either come up to the 10 seconds here, or I can type in 10 seconds over here by clicking on it and typing that in, and I will either take this little target right here and move it over like so, and that will key an animation, or I can type the animation in right here if I know the exact place I want to put it. But this works just as well, and you'll see we easily animated the rays over the 10-second time period. So now that I have the key points, I can go ahead and just press the U key, and it will bring up any key points I have on the layer. So you'll see by pressing it, I can see the source point, animation keys over the 10 seconds. And this is going to be good because we're going to put some other animation on this ray sequence itself. So another thing I want to do is I want to control the ray length and the boost light of it over time. We don't want it to necessarily start with rays, but we want it to about a second in to have rays appear from the right. So I will move about a second in, and it doesn't have to be a second, it can be whatever you think is right. And I will click the ray length stopwatch and the boost light stopwatch. And while I'm here, I'm gonna maybe crank this up, and I'm only using the boost light to show you in unison to the ray length, but you don't have to use the boost light or even worry about keying it. But now that we have keyed these points, I can press the U twice, and you'll see that it's brought up all the key layered points right here, which is good because we actually need that. And I want to move ahead to 9 seconds, and I want to go ahead and click these key points over here again so that we have the animation keyed from 1 second to 9 seconds. And you'll see in a second why we did that. So now that I have the key points at 1 and 9 seconds, I want to go all the way back to the beginning, and I just want to bring these values down to 0. And that's good. And I want to go all the way to the end, and by doing that I can click this and I'll jump to the end, and I want to bring these back down to 0 again. So you'll see kind of why we did that now. If I go to the very beginning and just kind of move along the timeline, it starts with just the plain logo, and then as we scrub across to the 1 second point, it grows, and then it's also constantly moving across. So this is really good for the basic ray length feature that we're trying to portray. So that looks good. I like it. So now that we have our light rays in place, we need to add something to this to give it a little bit of color depth. I mean, really, just the green on the green there's not enough going on. So I think the next step we can do is use a nice lens flare animation to complement these rays in the background. Now, After Effects has some basic lens flares that you can use, and just to show you what they look like, I will go ahead, oops, I don't want to do that. I will go ahead and make a new adjustment layer, drag it to the top, and I will drag this right on there, and you'll see this is the After Effects lens flare. And there are a few options up here, you can play around with it, and you'll also notice that it affects the shine layer, which, I think the way to fix this is actually put it on a solid instead of an adjustment layer, or you might be able to render it on there's different ways to fix this, but there's an easier way to get what we're looking for with a lot better outcome. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And then I'm going to make a new layer again. And let's just make a solid this time. And I'm going to go to my effects, and this is another really good plugin that you should get that will really help your After Effects learning experience. It's called No Light Factory, and this is basically like lens flares on steroids. There's so much to choose from here, and it's one of my favorite plugins when it comes to using lens flares. So I want to basically do the following. I want to okay, so the very first thing we have to do, which I didn't tell you guys, is we have to make sure that we composite it on top of the actual other layers. If you don't have this clicked, the lens flare on the solid doesn't shine, it doesn't come through. So you have to make sure you have that so it adds it to the actual composition. So go down to render in the very bottom and click the unmult, and that will give you kind of the add-on we're looking for. So we want to kind of animate this like we'd animate the rays, same kind of deal. So I'm going to go to my shine layer here, press U so I see my key points, and then I'll also go ahead and just say lens flare. I'll rename this layer so that we know what we're working with. And I can tell you right now, this is way too bright and obnoxious for what we're trying to do. Even if I scale along, you'll see with the rays, it doesn't work at all. So I think what we want to do is actually use a custom preset lens flare that the No Light Factory actually creates for us. So I will go into options, and I will see that there's all these different preset lens flares we can use, and I'll give it a second to kind of load all the lens flares, but you'll see that right away there's some that kind of fit the build of what we're trying to accomplish more. So I just scrolling around, just playing around with some of these, I can tell you I think I like the Javelin. This has the green, a little bit of yellow, and we can also play around with a glow ball by hiding it, but let's just keep it for now. And I'm going to come down here and say okay, and that looks good. That's great. So another thing we can do to kind of hide it is drop below the layer right there so it's behind it, and that is going to work really well for us. So now that I have that in place, I want to basically move this point over time. And so if I go to location and light source location right here, you'll see if I click this little target and I click right here and drag it now, and the computer has to catch up, but you'll see now that I can move the target around, the lens flare, and everything else kind of follows it, and this is perfect. So I'm going to put it right in the corner, and I'm also going to come to the 1 second point again, right? I'm going to press the stopwatch for the light source location, and then let's also think about how we're going to scale this down like we did with the light rays. So the brightness maybe, and the scale can be keyed, and I think these three are going to be good. So now that I have those 3 key points in place, I'll just press the U key, and you'll see again they populate themselves because they have been keyed. So that's good. I will go ahead and jump to the 9 second point, and I will, in this circumstance, I'll probably use the slider instead of the point, so I can actually keep it in a linear line. And I'll put it to that corner. And for these, I'll just duplicate them because we want them to stay consistent through the 1 to 9 second points. And at the very beginning, we'll do what we did with the shine, which is just bring these down to 0. And we'll jump to the 9 second point, or excuse me, the 10 second point, and just bring these down to 0 again, right here. And if you play it back, let's see what we got. It looks pretty good. We have, it comes on, the lens flare comes on, it does a little dance, scrolls along, and that looks pretty awesome. That's what we want. So one thing I forgot to mention is I kind of like to give the logo a little bit of movement itself. I don't want it just to sit there. So I need to kind of scale it up over time. And more importantly, when I scale the logo up, I want to make sure everything else scales up with it. Well, everything but the background. So we'll go ahead and lock the background. And maybe I can even just hide the layer by pressing the hide the layer key and then coming up here, and you'll see it disappears. So just know that if you click this, it'll come back and you just have to click this to make it off. But let's just go ahead and lie it. We don't need the black layer anymore. So I have my shine, my lens flare, and my logo. I want these two layers to scale up with my logo layer. So I'm going to pick whip, I'm going to select them two, and I'm going to use this little pick whip, it's called. And I'm just going to drag it to the logo, and you'll see now these two are parented to the logo layer, which is perfect. That's what we want. And that allows us to basically scale this up, and these will scale up with it without us having to key them. And we can also do different key points and change the parameters of these without affecting the logo. So this is definitely one of the best ways to do it. And it's easy to fix and change and tweak down the road. So at the 0 point, I will press the S key to bring up the scale. And I'll press the time, the stopwatch at 0. And then again, I'll come to 10 seconds, which is right there. And I will just scale it up. Let's just see what looks enough. And I'd say, 40%, or 40% more than what we have. And you'll see everything else is scaled up with it. The lens flare, the shine, it all kind of moves with it, which is exactly what we want. And it ends with a nice big clean logo right there, which is perfect. So that's like 2 out of 3 steps I wanted to show you how to basically enhance your logo or your layer. The next step is a little bit more complicated, but it's one of the coolest effects that you've definitely seen many places on the web and around the internet and on TV. And we're going to use it in a very basic way. And I will go ahead and show you that now.